So welcome to the CUTC webinar series. As many of you know, we've developed a series that's aimed at increasing the number of students and professionals from underrepresented groups in the transportation profession. CUTC obviously takes a very broad definition of transportation, so engineering, planning, business, law, safety, public health are all the areas we're interested in. This is the first of the CUTC seminars that seek to engage the Native American community in this endeavor. We've assembled a very distinguished panel of experts who understand the challenges and opportunities related to increasing the number of Native Americans in the transportation profession. Because this is the first of our webinars, we wanted to give a fairly broad introduction to the topic, and we are fortunate to have a representative cross-section of academia, both tribal colleges and R1 institutions, as well as speakers from the public and private sectors. The format of the panel will involve each of our distinguished speakers providing initial 7 to 8 minute overview of their perspective on the issue. We will then open up the panel for questions. Please note that all the questions will be provided through the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I will read the questions to the panelists and ask them to reply. Note that this is the first in a number of webinars related to Native Americans, and the goal is to provide a fairly broad overview today. We would love your feedback on topics that you'd be interested in learning more about. Our next topic will be featuring Native American university professors, but we have a lot of leeway on what the following ones will be. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts after this webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce our first panelist. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mike Otroje, who's president of Nebraska Indian Community College. They have a number of campuses in Macy, Nebraska, which is on Omaha Nation sovereign land, as well as in Santee, Nebraska, which is on Santee Sioux sovereign land. You can read his bio. He's very busy on what he does, but in his spare time, he serves as a member of the American Indian Higher Education Consortium and the American Indian College Fund. So Mike, I'll let you take over. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for the introduction, Larry. I'm going to try to share screen here. Oh. There we go. So hopefully everybody's seeing the screen right now. Well, basically, this is just a brief presentation about tribal colleges, universities, and generally we are all underfunded miracles. My name is Mike Otroje. I'm a tribal college alumni. I was a tribal college employee. I'm still the tribal college president for the Nebraska Indian Community College. I am not Native. I got my associate degree, well, 2 associate degrees from the Nebraska Indian Community College. My bachelor's degree is from Bellevue University, and I got a master's and a doctorate from Capella University. Basically, what I want to kind of go through is just a brief introduction to the tribal colleges, a special note about our land grant status, a little bit about our symbolism, and just some of our financing. Generally, if you don't know what a tribal college is an open enrollment college university that is chartered and is governed by a majority of Native people. Tribal colleges must also serve a majority of Native American students. Our purpose is that we were, started in the 70s, at the same time the community college movement was getting some footing. Basically, we are focused on culture and language preservation and revitalization. We are focused on making sure that we have access to academic, technical, and vocational training. We try to transform the residents of our areas to become active citizens in their communities, the reservations, the state, and the nation. And currently, there are over 30 tribal colleges and universities. Right now, we have 38 tribal colleges operating, 75 campuses across the nation. 35 of us are accredited institutions in higher education. It's about a 2/3 split between like the Higher Learning Commission and other accrediting bodies. Collectively, we serve over 12,000 degree-seeking students. We also serve about 35,000 non-degree seeking students or enrichment type of students, students who come in to just grab a class here or there, or possibly a language, history, culture, that kind of thing. All of us have incredibly small student faculty ratios. We're at about an 8-to-1 student to faculty ratio. Our tuitions are very low as well. The average tuition is $2,937 per year. About 85% of the TCU students are eligible for Pell programs, so we're all serving low-income students. Most of our students are also first-generation students. Only 2 of the institutions offer student loans. For those of you who have some Title IV experience, student loans can certainly be a little bit of a detriment. All TCUs also offer associate degrees, 15 offer baccalaureate programs, and 5 offer master's degrees. And then based off of MCI and other data, the return of investment for TCUs is for every $1 invested in us is about a $5.20 return, which is fantastic. One of the other issues I wanted to point out, this is just a map based off it's called the 1994 land grant map. All of the TCUs are land grant institutions. So everybody's, somewhat familiar with their main land grant in their states. For example, the University of Nebraska. In Nebraska, Lincoln is the land grant. However, so is Nebraska Indian Community College and Little Prairie Tribal College. We all try to help serve our communities to the best extents that we're able to. And just some of the symbolism. NICC is a tribal college. There's symbolism in many, many other things that we do. For example, our logo. Our logo is a circle by intention, just because everything is circular. We have our eagle feathers. Our eagle feathers are pointing to the 4 directions. We have the white buffalo in the middle, which is which is sacred to our Dakota people, who is our Santee Nation. In the background, you see the 4 hills back there. Those are the 4 hills of life, which are sacred to the Omaha people. And then the bison is standing on the Missouri River, which for the most part, 3 of our campuses reside on. Currently, NICC has 3 campuses in Nebraska, 1 on the Omaha Reservation, 1 on the Santee Reservation, 1 in South Sioux City. And we also have 1 location, which is an additional location and is not permanent, but is official as of October 13th in Pawnee, Oklahoma. So we're very happy about that partnership. And this slide just details some of the other symbolism, some of the other logos from the other tribal colleges, universities. As you can tell from their logos, everybody, the entire tribal college movement is very rooted in our communities. Many of our TCU programs also take advantage of the American Indian College Fund. What the American Indian College Fund does is they generally help with providing scholarship support to the tribal colleges and universities. We are also all members of AHEC. AHEC is the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. For the most part, this is a group where all of the presidents get together about 3 times a year to try to discuss bigger topic issues, as well as just being able to kind of work through issues at home with others who have experienced the same types of things. And I just also wanted to make sure that I touched upon the finances of tribal colleges. Most of the tribal colleges are fairly small. Most of us are under 500 students. So our main revenue sources are tuition and fees, the Tribally Controlled Community College University Act. And for anybody who's not real familiar with that act, basically what it does is it helps subsidize students who are beneficiary students or students who are native students going to our schools, very much the same way that many states fund their state colleges. And then the remainder of our operations comes from grants through indirect costs and just and some donations, not a huge amount of donations, but just kind of flopping back on the grant connection. Though some of the grant connection is how NICC met MATC, which is the Mid-America Transportation Center in Nebraska, and we've been working with them for a long time. And that's how some of the relationship with Dr. Rylette started as well. But at tribal colleges, everybody wears so many different hats. Well, for example, I've been the president since 2004, and up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I was also the one who was doing the yard maintenance at the Macy campus. So that's how kind of restricted we are. But anyway, I'm not sure if I've made it to my time or if I'm out of time, but I want to thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Mike. We're going to, as we indicated at the beginning, we're going to save our questions for the end. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for Mike. Our next panelist is Mr. Chris Howell. He's the executive director of the Kansas Native American Affairs Office and serves as the tribal liaison for Governor Laura Kelly. He also has a unique background that he was also director of tribal relations for BNSF Railway and was involved in tribal outreach activities and communications with more than 86 tribal nations. Mr. Howe is a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. And Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Appreciate the invitation to be a part of this this panel today. I'll give you a little bit of background about BNSF Railway. It covers the western 2/3 of the United States. And as Larry mentioned, there was 86 different tribes within the United States that we had to develop relationships with for BNSF Railway. Tracks crossed tribal lands. We also had different facilities that were located either on tribal lands or close to tribal lands. And then there was also the rail system that went into British Columbia, where we engaged with about another 150 or so First Nations into Canada. So there was lots of activity in tribal communications for BNSF Railway. The challenge was to build this particular effort to focus on tribal outreach, tribal communications. We were given just one other person who was based in the Pacific Northwest to provide liaison services for the tribes in the Pacific Northwest. That was a crucial area because there's a lot of ports in that area and lots of construction activity that went along with the railroad in that particular area. So it was very important that we maintained a lot of communications with the Pacific Northwest tribes. However, the same could be said for just about any tribe all along the western 2/3 of the United States. One of the busiest corridors that we had was the Southern Transcon that comes from the Port of Los Angeles down through New Mexico, through Gallup, and on in through Kansas and Texas and into Chicago area. And it's a very busy section of the rail system. BNSF is a Class 1 railroad. It's one of the largest that there is in the United States. There are very few Class 1s, but the other one that was the main competition for BNSF was Union Pacific. And as far as I know, Union Pacific did not have a similar effort for tribal outreach, and they handled their communications for tribal consultations and tribal communications through their community outreach efforts that they had there at the Union Pacific. As I said, the challenge was for us was a big effort of just trying to maintain communications with so many different tribes. The demand on the job was very, very high. It was an 80% travel job. I was home on the weekends if I was lucky. And the most cities that I would fly into in 1 week was 3, just trying to hit the ground running and then go meet with the tribes and then get back on another flight and make it to the next port or the next city to try and meet with tribes. So while it was a very rewarding job, it was also very demanding. And with the outbreak that's happened with COVID, that particular effort I know has been shut down for a lot of different industries, and I'm sure that the railroad industry is one of those that's had that same impact. People are just not traveling as much as they used to, although some of that is starting to pick up now again. I know there's going to be a lot of questions, or I hope there's going to be some questions about the effort at BNSF Railroad. I'll let you know that the BNSF no longer have the tribal relations effort going on with the railroad. And I have some thoughts on that while that happened. I know some of the challenges that I faced while I was there with the railroad are probably the challenges that remained after my departure. But there's lots of lessons to be learned from that, and I carry that with me now on the role that I have with the governor's office. And by the way, this is the second administration that I've worked for the governor in this particular capacity. So the other things that are going on with the rail industry is like anybody else. We're all waiting for that big infrastructure, bill to go through to find out exactly where the new money is going to be. And there's going to be some challenges for that money and some competition for that money when it comes to tribal communities. And tribal communities need that money also. There's a lot of different safety issues. when it comes to grade crossings, when it comes to grade separations, building bridges and tunnels, and those kinds of things, and the increasing size of railroad trains from what used to be just a few cars to now trains get up into the length of over a mile long, and that creates a real challenge for lots of different communities. So I think I'll close my comments for now and pass it on to our next speaker, but I hope that we have some real good engagement for the question and answer session. Thank you very much, Larry.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Great overview. Our next speaker is Ms. Sydney Allen. She's a partner and technical advisor for Nebraska Accident Reconstruction. She received her BS and MS degrees from University of Nebraska in 2019 and 2021. Sydney's originally from South Dakota, is an enrolled member of the Ogallala Sioux Nation. So Sydney, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Eilert. So today I'm just kind of giving you, I guess, my perspective or my experience as a student. So like Dr. Eilert said, I started in South Dakota. I'm from South Dakota. I went to South Dakota School of Mines and Technology for 3 years before transferring to UNL. And one of the programs that I was able to be a part of there was TAOSHPE, which is a program, it was NSF funded at the time. They ran out of funding, or their funding ended. So I'm not sure what they're doing now. I need to check in on that. But one of the things that made it really successful, and I credit it to getting me through my engineering degree, my undergraduate degree, was first, they provided financial support, which is great, but also a sense of community. One of the things that we did was we had to have lunch together every Tuesday, and we would have, a different speaker every time talking about how to fill out a FAFSA, or, different things like that are relevant to college students. So getting to know each other. And then we also were told when another TAOSHPE member was in a class of ours, so that you could have that person that you can reach out to for help. And then in addition to that, for every core class like calculus, chemistry, things like that, you had to study for 1 hour a week. It was mandatory. You had to have it signed off that you came together as a group and studied. So those kinds of things that kind of just make you get habits that make you successful are incredibly important for all students, but also especially Native American students. Because when you come from, like a reservation or somewhere where everyone, you don't have to reach out to people you don't know for help. And so by doing this, it forced you to know them so that you have someone that you're comfortable and able to reach out to. So I thought that was really, really helpful. And I would love to see programs like that in other schools, especially with challenging degrees like STEM degrees, where, help is necessary. So then transferred to UNL, which was great, got involved with MATSE, with Dr. Eilert and Gabe, and was able to participate in some of the programs there. But through that, we were hosting a panel one time for students, and one of our speakers was talking about her own experience as a Native American student. And she made a comment that has stayed with me for years now. She had a full ride scholarship to go to Kansas, which was great. You would think that, what more could you need if you have a full ride scholarship as a student? That's a great opportunity. But she still took out the maximum student loans. And that was because she had nieces and nephews back home that needed things, diapers, food. And so that's what she had to do. She had to take out the student loans and send that money back home so that her nieces and nephews could be taken care of. So going beyond financial support is incredibly important, or I guess beyond just tuition support. And that was one of the things that I was able to take advantage of at School of Mines is, your scholarship was not maxed out at what your schooling would cost. It was, this is the money that's available to you, whether that is used for schooling, room and board, or, to be sent back to family, that's available. And so I just think that that's something that's incredibly important that, a lot of folks don't think about or don't consider. So that was something that really stood out to me. And then as I finished my degree at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Dr. Eilert was in my ear about potentially doing a master's degree. And I was, did not want to do it, right? After so many years in school, I did not finish my undergrad in 4. It took me 5.5. So an additional 2 years was not extremely appealing. But here's what sold me on it was he said, Sydney, you can do a project on a Native American reservation. You can do transportation issues in Native American communities. Now, do you want to do it? And I was like, okay, I'll stick around for that because it's important. It's really important. And so I think that opportunity to be able to do projects that are relevant is also extremely important and helps kind of push them over the edge if they're like me and they weren't super into it. I also got that opportunity as an undergraduate student. I was able to set up a traffic camera out by the Nebraska Indian Community College campus because their campus is across the highway from the village of Macy. And so their students generally walk to campus. And when they do that, they have to cross a highway with 65-mile-an-hour speed limit. And then they're also looking to put in a daycare there for their students with children. So the idea of having not only college students, but also their children crossing a highway is just sickening. So doing that traffic study to prove that people are crossing and to see what kind of traffic they're having and to pass that on. So hopefully some solutions can be proposed to help mitigate that risk. So I think that those kinds of things, being able to put your education to work, even as an undergrad or as a graduate student, is incredibly valuable. And it really resonates with Native American students that feel like they can make a difference in their community. I know I'm a little bit under time, but I think that's about all I have to say. So I'll pass it off. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Sydney. As you all heard from all of our speakers, they have a deep passion for what they do. And you've heard some of the challenges, but I also like to focus on this as some of the opportunities. We'll come back to that. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A, because after our next speaker, we're going to open up questions for the panel. And it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Gabriel Bruyere, who's the Education Outreach Coordinator for the Mid-American Transportation Center at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. As you can imagine, he also has a great passion for doing outreach to Native American students, and he'll be talking about that. Dr. Bruyere is an enrolled member of the Yankton Sioux Nation. So, Gabe, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thank you, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so today I'll be talking about the Mid-America Transportation Center, some of the outreach programs with a Native American focus. Before I get started with my presentation, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that the University of Nebraska is a land-grant institution with campuses and programs on the past, present, and future homelands of the Pawnee, Ponca, Otoe, Missouri, Omaha, Dakota, Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Kaw peoples, as well as the relocated Ho-Chunk, Iowa, Sac and Fox peoples. Please take a moment to consider the legacies of more than 150 years of displacement, violence, settlement, and survival that brings us here today. This acknowledgement and the centering of Indigenous peoples is a start as we move forward together for the next 150 years. Okay, so like Larry mentioned, I do work at the Mid-America Transportation Center. It's part of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Region 7, and since 2016, Region 7 University Transportation Centers. And here you can see some of the different institutions that are part of that region. And since 2016, the headquarters has been at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln at the Nebraska Transportation Center. And so what I'll talk to you about today is some of the challenges that Native American students who are looking to continue on their post-secondary education at a four-year institution face, and some of the different programs that we've established over the years. And so here we see some statistics about four-year institution study. 19% of 18 through 24% or 24-year-old Native American students are enrolled in college, compared to 41% of the overall US population. And the next point is that undergraduate enrollment of among Native Americans aged 18 to 24 decreased from 2016 to 2017. And you can see the difference in the two figures there. And that just talks about getting into college. And then once students are in college, there's a difference in the completion rate of the degree. And that is at 41% of first-time, full-time Native students attending a four-year institution beginning in 2012 graduated within 6 years, compared to 62% for all students. And there are a number of different background factors that contribute to that. And so here in this slide, I just have some of the challenges that face Native American students as they look forward to studying at a four-year institution. And one of those is invisibility, which includes lack of Native faculty, staff, students on campus, and a lack of student support or space on campus. Another challenge is lack of access to educational opportunities during secondary education. Many students are less likely to have had family members that have attended college. And then culture shock, which as Sydney mentioned in her talk, and is that, you know, if a student is coming from a reservation school, they're most likely coming from an institution where everybody's like them to something that's very different. You know, the University of Nebraska has 25,000 students on its campus, which is much, much bigger than, you know, any experience that many of the students around, at least in this region, have encountered before. And so after having gone over those, I'll talk a little bit about some of the programs that MATC has developed over the years, and some of the things, some of the ways that we address the challenges that Native students face. And the first one I'll talk about is the MATC Scholars Program for TCU tribal college and university students. And the overview is that it's a 3-day conference for TCU students interested in continuing their education at a 4-year institution. Sessions and panels are led by majority Native American university faculty, staff, and students. Sessions and panels address application process, scholarships and funding, student success, and Native experiences in higher education. And here are a few stats on the program. It's been offered in 2016, 2018, 2019, and virtually in 2020. We've had 46 unique students. Our faculty and speaker participation has been 32, and a lot of those are repeating people. And then organizations, our 15 different organizations have been involved that we've collaborated with. And one of those, of course, is Nebraska Indian Community College, who are our partners and who we work very closely to come up with programs. So the significance of a bridge program like the Scholars Program is that 78% of students, of all students at TCU, well, you see some stats there. So there's a very high number of Native American students who are currently studying at tribal colleges, and it's likely that a good portion of those are interested to continue on their education at a 4-year program. And so what the MATC Scholars Program does is it offers a bridge from one educational institution to the next. And I have a lot of, we have a lot of qualitative and quantitative data that we do take from, or, you know, that we get from our program evaluations. And I wanted to include this quote that one student offered in 2018 after the program. She said that it reinforced in my brain that I can, everything that I've been doing, I can do, I can accomplish it. I can keep everybody, and that I can keep going. Everybody before me was like, you can't do that, you can't do that. And I was like, well, I'm gonna at least try, and now that I'm here, I can do it. I know I can do it. And so that was a very, that one stood out to me as especially impactful. Next, I'll tell you a little bit about our NCIA MATC Sovereign Native Youth STEM Leadership Academy. Here is our 2018 group. That was our largest group. It's a week-long extended learning opportunity for Native American secondary education students. It's a residential program held on the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And our educational goals are to fill a gap in students' engineering education, to strengthen leadership skills and post-secondary access and achievement. And we've offered this program, we held it from 2017 to 2019 in person and 2020 virtually. And here are some of the stats. We've had 75 students who've gone through the program. 11 of those students are returning students, and 47 faculty, staff, and other community leaders have been involved in leading the program. And so from some qualitative data that we've got on the program, from the prompt, what did you learn from this program? Some of the students reported that they learned how to break out of their shell, how to prepare for this for their future, earn or get scholarships. Learned a lot of relatives is relevant because students might not have known that they're related to a student, and then they come and then they gain connections. They learn that anything is possible and that can do anything, and that there are a lot more careers than they had been aware of. And then, I'm a little bit over time, so I'll just kind of quickly talk about our final program, the after school program. And that is a weekly extended learning opportunity for students in the K through 12 range with an emphasis on middle school. The educational goals are to fill gaps in students' engineering education and to encourage the continuation of STEM subjects in their secondary and then hopefully their post-secondary education. And it's offered in schools with highly diverse student populations with a demonstrated socioeconomic need. And as you can see from these stats, the Rose Rails and Race Cars has been in continuous progress over the last decade, and a lot of students have gone through. And I'm proud to report that since 2017, we have been offering the program in 3 schools that are specific to the reservations, and then we've been offering those ongoing since then. So I guess that will wrap it up for my part of the presentation. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and I will turn it back to Larry. Thank you.
So thank you, Gabe. I just wanted to just follow up on a number of things that Gabe said that I think are important. I'm now at Auburn University, but I'm kind of familiar with the programs at Nebraska. And I think almost all of them, I can guarantee that the administration didn't come up with these on their own. It was really working with the communities. What do you want? What do you need? How can we help? That's where the after school program came from, the scholars program, and the academy came from, the summer academy, with working with the communities, came up with that. So now it's time for Q&A, and we have a number on board. So I'm going to start off with Kimberly. I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I'm not sure I'm going to get it right, but she does work for the Department of Transportation, and she is an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe. And her question is, what are some of the ways to recruit Native American transportation workers that have a distrust of the government? And I'm going to pass this one off to Chris to begin with, because he's have both public and private sector experience. So Chris, do you want to take that question?
No, but I will. You give me the hardest one first, right? Well, that's a big one. That really is. I mean, because when you ask that question, there is a giant can of worms that goes along with that. You have the history of the beginning of the United States to now. There has been this ongoing mistrust of tribes and working with government at any level, whether it's the federal, whether it's state, or whether it's local. It's always a challenge, no matter what. And I think what you have to do, like with any organization, is that organizational structure, whether it's corporate or whether it's governmental, has to make the effort to show that incorporating tribal issues into their structure, to their base structure, is key to showing that you understand the issues within those tribal communities. And you can go right to, in a transportation situation with rail and roads, you can go right to, do you have the right-of-ways? Can you prove your right-of-way to put this asphalt down and create this road across this reservation or near this reservation? Do you have the right of ways? Do all those documents, are they up to date to put down a rail system, across the reservation? And are you adhering to everything within those documents that were created a long time ago to create this infrastructure on and around reservation communities? Once your organization understands that and incorporates that, and the first question out of there in their mind when they have a new project is, how does this impact our right of way? How does this impact the tribe? What are our relationships currently with this tribe? And do we need their approval to create this piece of infrastructure in and around their land? How is this going to impact them? And what are our relationships like with them? I mean, that's the real goal of a tribal relations department, of a team, and the professionals that go along with that. And this one little last thing that I'll say is that people really underestimate the professionalism of what it takes to be a liaison, because I think that terminology of being a liaison a lot of times is seen as a catchphrase of just telling somebody they've got a cush job and they can just do whatever they want. That is not the case. When you have to go out there and build relationships, that is precisely what a liaison has to do. You are depending on that person and their reputation to build your corporate and your government reputation in that community. That is an important job. So I hope I answered some of that question.
Oh, that was excellent, Chris. Thank you. I think I'll ask Sydney as well, because you're sort of on the other end of the spectrum right now. Sydney, you just graduated, and I was wondering, be interested in knowing your thoughts on how to recruit Native American students to the DOTs.
I don't know. I don't have an excellent answer. I guess it would have to be, just be transparent with your intentions. Are you the token Native American to kind of flash out there and say, hey, look, we got one so you can trust us? Or is it, is it good intentions and, we want you because you're smart and we think that you'd be an excellent fit for this position, and, we can offer you projects that are important to you and that will help Native American communities, rather than just convince them that they need this. It's just, that would be, I guess, my 2 cents on it.
Thanks, Sydney. Yeah, they were tough questions. They were great answers, Sydney and Chris. So thank you. And Kimberly, thank you for the question. I'm going to have the next question. It will be going to Mike. Mike, the question is, have dual credit or AP high school courses facilitated matriculation from high school to college?
Thanks for asking the question. Generally, well, at NICC, the answer should be yes. We've been offering dual credit fairly consistently for just the past 7 to 10 years. And however, in that time, one of the things that we've been doing with our dual credit students is we don't charge tuition to our dual credit students because generally our students are, well, the students that we're offering dual credit to are also the students who are attending the college, and everybody knows that our students are generally low-income students. So then it comes back to the same game with just my college students about trying to get, like orange juice from an apple type of thing. But anyway, the high school matriculations rates have slowly been increasing, at least in the reservations where we've been offering dual credit. I would love to say that all of those students who we're offering free credits to are coming to NICC. However, a lot of them are still going to other institutions. And then many times we end up getting them back when they come back home later. So hopefully that helps answer the question a little bit.
Great. Thanks, Mike. I have another question. And this one will go to Gabe. It's about roads, rails, and race cars. And this is from David Hadwiger. Does the program, does the roads, rails, and race cars after school program include any materials from the AASHTO Tracks Engineering Outreach Program? And so, Gabe, I guess you can answer that question and maybe also a little description of how you get the materials for that program.
No, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with that program. So the answer to the direct answer to the question is no. But as Larry mentioned, how we have come about it. So the genesis of the Roads, Rails, and Race Cars program was from a group of science teachers here in Lincoln, Nebraska, who were interested in creating engineering curriculum and as an after-school offering to, like I mentioned, to fill the gaps in their engineering education of their students. And then through that group, who partnered with Larry and some faculty from the Department of Education, I believe, or the Center for School. I don't recall. I wasn't here at that point.
College of Education. But
College
yeah.
of Education. Yeah, thank you, Larry. Through that, it developed into the curriculum that we have. And ongoing, we've offered a number of curriculum expansions, and a lot of it just kind of proceeds organically of what students are interested in. But also, one feature that I've kind of employed since I've been working here is getting input from our student mentors. So the program is run by student mentors who are engineering students. Sydney was one of those students that was part of the program from 2017 through 2021. We worked together last summer. And so what I do is I offer the opportunity for students to develop curriculum that's usually based on their particular field of engineering. Sydney contributed ones on for our summer program on bicycle. What was it, Sydney? Maybe you can talk about that one a little bit better, but they're usually focused on the students' actual discipline. And then we also have initiatives to develop culturally specific materials. And I've worked with students from the Omaha Indian Reservation, the school on, the Omaha Nation Community School, public school. They've contributed lesson plans to that. So it kind of grows organically, but I'm always open to reviewing new materials and developing that into the curriculum.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. That was an excellent answer. And just for those of you who are interested in working in these types of K through 12 activities, it's in our experience, it's always been almost impossible to get into the regular school curriculum because it's so prescribed that trying to add anything to it, but we can add additional support to it. And that's where these after school and summer programs come from, is that it's a lot more flexibility in offering content there. And as Gabe has indicated, he's done an excellent job of making a lot of it culturally sensitive. Here's the next question. We'll be going actually to Sydney as well. And I think we'll probably ask Gabe. I'd be interested to hear from Sydney to know if we need to get students in high school to make sure that they understand that there are many different fields that are involved with transportation. So Sydney, your experience with working with high school students, and then I'll pass that over to Gabe after you finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, a direct, with our Sovereign Native Youth leadership program that we do in the summer. I heard one student actually make the comment one time that when they came at the beginning of the week, they're a senior in high school, and there's a casino on over by Walt Hill where they live, and that's where their dad works. And so they just figured after they graduated high school, they would just go work at the casino. But after coming to our program for a week and hearing all the speakers and everything, they're like, oh, maybe I'll give college a shot. Maybe I will check out NICC or, UNL or, whatever else. So yeah, I think absolutely kind of what Gabe mentioned with representation of, what's possible. People that look like me, came from a place similar to me, can do this. So then I can do this too. That I think is definitely lacking, that high school outreach is absolutely necessary. Kind of unrelated, but I just wanted to make the quick comment. Our scholars program for our our tribal college students that we bring out, something that I really like about it, or I think is really admirable about it, is it's not a recruitment event for UNL. We would love for them to come to UNL, but if they go to, Haskell or Iowa or, anywhere, that's a win. You know, we're not trying to get them to go, you know, pushing them specifically at UNL. Obviously, it's just where we host and where we're at. But so I think that that's kind of something that's worth mentioning with that program. But yeah, Gabe, anything that you have to add?
Yeah, we do emphasize that transportation as a field is so broad, and that there are a lot of different ways to get into it. So, you know, it's not just the engineering part of it, but it's a legal part of it. One of our frequent collaborators, Rebecca Schlichting, talks about how you can use a career in journalism to work into transportation. So there's so many different fields. And yeah, what we do is try to get the students exposed to as many different possibilities that appeal to them, or that, you know, speak to some of the passions that they have, that they can develop. And they know, well, they always know that we're there because, you know, we will constantly we're constantly in contact with them. So they don't forget about MATC, and they don't forget about transportation. That's the long-term goal. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Gabe. Next question is from Cesar Colantes. Is there a national consortium organization of all TCUs where federal agencies can collaborate with to disseminate federal career and internship opportunities? Is ACES one source, and are there others? And they go on, for example, with Hispanics and other minorities serving institution title HSIs, an example, the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities headquartered in San Antonio, Texas, an office in Washington, D.C., represented over 550 Hispanic serving institutions. So Mike, I'm gonna pass that one on to you. So is there an organization that people from government and other universities can reach out to?
Yeah, of course. The American Indian Higher Education Consortium. They're actually located in Alexandria, Virginia. All the presidents meet 3 times a year, which help constitute that body as well. I believe my contact information is in the bio. Is that right, Larry?
Yep.
Because I mean, otherwise you can certainly send me an email, give me a phone call, and I can get you in contact with Carrie Billy, who is the executive director of that group. I believe we are trying to have our next in-person meeting in February in DC. And we usually have it in the FEMA building in DC, right across at that Holiday Inn across the street from the Department of Ed. But anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thanks, Mike. And again, if anyone wants to reach out, if you're having trouble, you can reach out to CUTC, you can reach out to myself, and we'll make sure you get connected to the right folks. I'm going to take the opportunity. I should say this seminar goes to 2, and I think most people we're going to continue to go on until all the questions are answered. I wanted to follow up with Mike though on a question that a lot of people have. So as the people on this call know, CUTC represents over 80 transportation centers from across the United States. Many of them have funding from the US DOT as federally funded university transportation centers. Part of that funding requires outreach to underrepresented groups and minority serving institutions. Right now, there are 2 tribal colleges and universities amongst the approximately 40 federally funded UTCs, which I think we can all agree is probably very small. NICC is one of them. So Mike, I'd be very interested in what you think, or how our community could do a better job of reaching out to the tribal colleges and universities to participate in these UTCs. Particularly with this infrastructure bill coming up, there's going to be an opportunity for new competition. So I think all of our listeners would be interested to hear your thoughts on what is the best practices for doing that.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, generally some of the best ways, just to develop a relationship, is to develop that relationship. I think you've heard through all of the presentations today that relationships are very, very much needed. Those are very important. Within the tribal college circuit, at the very least. So just trying to reach out to your independent or your individual tribal colleges to try to develop those relationships over time. What we need to do is we need to try to make true partnerships. because even though it's sometimes there's high turnover to some of the TCUs, everybody is still so capacity poor. Everybody's wearing so many different hats that it'll take a little bit of time to develop those relationships. Just keep that in mind as well. But also keep in mind that generally we do retain retain a long history. We have a great memory. For example, I still remember, well, just kind of getting rolled over by some of the 1862s in the early days, where they show up with their grant proposal ready to go and they want to partner, but they don't want to partner. They want to have a minority serving institution name on it so then they can take all the funds and just leave us out later. And those are the partnerships that aren't good. And a lot of the institutions have some of those partnerships, or that have some of that historical partnership. So yeah, going about it in a good way is just try to develop those relationships sooner rather than later and make sure it's a true partnership. Understanding that the tribal colleges certainly aren't funded very well at all. And so hopefully that kind of helps answer the question.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer, Mike. And I think you hit obviously, you know the world about how to do these things correctly and incorrectly. And I think it'll be a focus of some of our upcoming webinars as well as how best engage. But it was a very good answer. And as I said, I think there's a lot of interest in getting the numbers of the different tribal colleges and universities, getting more of them involved, getting more of their students involved in a meaningful way. I also wanted to follow up with Chris right now. Chris, you have a great background with BNSF and working with tribal communities, and people are getting ready to write these new proposals for the UTCs. For the ones that are sort of railway related, and do you have any, and actually roadway related in a lot of ways, do you have any ideas on potential research projects or areas of research that you could see being impactful for tribal communities that people may want to consider as they're writing these proposals?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier the grade separations, bridges and tunnels, and Sydney even mentioned it too in her presentation that crossings are so dangerous in Indian country. Often there's not enough lighting. There's faded paint on the highways. Some of the railroad crossings don't have lights and bells and other things like that, and all those things cost money. And the way that those crossings are financed is it's generally a partnership with the community and then with the transportation provider, the industry itself. And that's a little bit backwards. If you've been given a right of way to go across a tribal land, then you should be the one providing all of the resources to provide safe crossings. That's just common sense. And why isn't that the case? And so I think there needs to be a little more attention paid to that aspect of it. And then also too, there's a couple of pueblos out there in New Mexico that I used to visit all the time, talking specifically about these grade crossings. And the unfortunate thing is that they would go through the grant process to try and get the funding to get those construction projects started. But the cost was prohibitive for a tribe. And even when they tried to do a cost share with the industry provider, it wasn't a benefit to the industry provider. And I think that we really need to take a look at the right of ways. We really need to understand what that means, because when you give up a right of way, you give up a lot. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that the distance between crossings, because of these long trains, if any one of those trains gets stopped and they happen to block both of two entrances to pueblos or to other communities, then you have issues with emergency services. You have issues with school buses. There's all kinds of things that can happen, and that needs to be looked at too, where there needs to be areas where they cannot block. You cannot block these areas. That needs to be something that needs to be looked at. Is there a way to schedule, these shipments in a way and create these corridors where you are not allowed to stop? You cannot stop. I think that's something that really needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. And I'm sure you'd get a lot of people in Indian country who would just, have a heyday with that and provide you a lot of information of how that has impacted every aspect of their community, whether it's, just everyday commuting back and forth to school and to work, but also for different ceremonies and different activities that happen on those tribal lands. So.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I'll just follow up on what Chris was saying. I mean, the reality is that there's 574 federally recognized American Indian and Alaskan Native tribes and villages in the country. And I'm sure the panelists will agree that almost every one of them is unique in their own way. They have their own issues. And it really is, if you're looking at, oh, we want to help do research, we want to work with them, it really means getting involved with them, understanding what those issues are. And as Chris indicated, there are a lot of, and Sydney indicated, there are a lot of important research issues that you could partner with that would be very beneficial to those communities. The next question I'm going to send to Gabe. Thanks for these wonderful presentations. I teach in a master's level program in planning. Do you have any thoughts about recruiting students to graduate programs when you aren't involved in undergraduate programs? So Gabe, if you want to give that, want to answer that.
Boy, yeah, that's a tough one. Usually bridge programs, like the bridge program that so maybe a little bit more background about the scholars program. So the scholars program was actually established as a bridge program for HBCUs and HSI students who are advanced in their undergraduate career to pursue graduate studies. And so the original program included how to write a graduate application, graduate research, and a lot of those different things. So and the success rate of the program, it became pretty apparent after a number of years of running it. And so that just sort of confirms the overall success of bridge programs. So one thing I would recommend would be to see if there are these sorts of programs that exist for that. And then if not, how might you be able to kind of do a mini version of that if you don't have, the resources to put a full program together. Is essentially, yeah, what I just like to promote these bridge programs just because I know that, they're successful. They get, students from one part of their educational career to the next. And yeah, so I guess that's my long-winded answer to your question.
Excellent answer, Gabe. The only thing I would add to Gabe's answer is that guaranteed there's a lot of these types of programs out there at different things. They're always looking for volunteers to help work with them, right, Gabe? I mean, I'm not sure we've ever turned down a volunteer. So even though you're not running a full program, I think there's a lot of opportunity to participate in ones that are already ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're always looking for volunteers. That's what I'll say. The next couple of questions were about how to get folks involved, getting information to TCU standards. I think those have been answered. Betty Tolson asks, I work for Maryland DOT in the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, DBE program. After several decades, consistency have little to no participation for individually owned Native American businesses. Any suggestions on how to build or who to build relationship with encourage participation in small business contracting programs? So Chris, I know I keep giving you these tough ones, but I think given your background in both the public and private sector, would you be willing to try and take that, answer that one?
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. So I think one of the first things that any organization, whether it's private industry or whether it's governmental, needs to do first is do an internal assessment in their purchasing, in their purchasing programs and contracting programs, and because they could just simply be requesting something that is really out of the reach of a small business. And this most simple example is you have Acme company that can produce 100,000 widgets in a month, and that's exactly what a rail system may need, and they need exactly 100,000 widgets in a month. but a minority-owned business can only produce 50,000 widgets or 25,000 widgets or whatever. And so they can't even meet the contracting requirements, right out of the gate. And so they won't even look at a contract. They won't even look at that opportunity because they don't meet that minimum requirement. So I think that there needs to be, first of all, that internal look is what are we doing with our contracting to go out there and really focus our efforts on enticing those small business operations to work for us. How can we diversify that group, that pool? And first of all, we need to look internally to see how that's going to happen. The other thing is, and I say this all the time, an email, it's a flyer in the mail, those kinds of things, just from a generic email list that you get from somebody, is trash. I mean, it goes directly from your mailbox or, from your inbox into your trash, regardless if it's electronic or if it's, if it's something paper. What really makes a difference is, are you at those trade shows that actually have those minority businesses, there? Have you talked with them directly to find out what do they need or what can they supply and how can they, what are the challenges they see in your particular industry, your particular group, they go right to them and ask them and they'll tell you exactly what is the problem or what the issues are. And the other thing is knocking on doors. I think that, when somebody shows up at my doorstep or shows up at my office, I know it's important. There's something there that they need from me. Now, of course, you can blow that out of proportion when it comes to, the door-to-door salesman, that kind of stuff. But here's, you got to start somewhere. If somebody shows up in front of me and they ask for my time and I want to listen to them, I'll give them the time. But if there's somebody that I really can't help, I'll tell them I really can't help you, and please, move along and, and good luck with what you're trying to accomplish. So, but I think, yeah, the first thing is for any organization, do an internal assessment first. How are we operating? And are we really operating with the smaller providers or the smaller contractors in mind?
Great. Thanks, Chris. Excellent answer. And thank you for the question, Betty. I see Cesar had another question about sort of connecting. I think Mike's already answered it. So the last question we have is from Don Tucker Thomas from FHWA. Where can I obtain the list of TCUs containing engineering programs? So I'm going to pass that to you, Mike, and maybe I'll ask, if you wanted to find out what kind of programs are in any TCU, maybe that would be, you can expand on that as well. Is there such a list?
I'm pretty sure there's a list. However, I'm not incredibly sure where that list would be. I know the American Indian Higher Education Consortium should have it. I'm guessing that the American AISIS, American Indian Science and Engineering Society, should have it as well.
Right.
And then just individual colleges, because I know a lot of us do, well, many of us, at least the 15 of us at the associate degree granting level, a lot of us do just basic STEM education. So we're not really doing high engineering or high types of research. But no, for example, like Ola Lakota, Sintakleshka, Salish Kootenai, Northwest Indian College, those are 4 of the 4-year schools that probably offer masters as well that may have engineering programs, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Lots of different avenues.
Yeah, so
that's a specific answer.
No, that's good. Thanks, Mike. And I think Don on ACES is probably one of the ones to connect to. And they have a number of student chapters at some of the universities, and I can certainly help you get connected to those folks if you need it. The last Q&A is not actually a question, it's just a comment from Cesar Calantes. This is such an informative webinar. Hope to contribute effort and collaboration in the future with others in DOT to help make a small difference. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience. And I'm going to say the same thing to Chris and Mike and Sydney and Gabe. I know you're all very busy, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk about not only the challenges, but the opportunities of doing this. For those of you on, as I started at the beginning, this is an ongoing series of webinars, and the next one we're planning with CUTC will be university faculty talking about their experiences. And we're going to have a number of others. So feel free to reach out to me or to others on the CUTC executive committee if you have ideas that you would like to see for future webinars. We really like that input. So with that, that's it for the questions. Again, thanks to our panelists. That was great. Thank you, Tracy and Genevieve, for your help in putting this on. And I hope everyone has a safe and enjoyable weekend, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Thank you.